Hello, everyone. Welcome to your first class. So this course is called Biosphere Ecology. I believe all of you are new students, first year, first semester. And so my name is Dr. Nafiza Muhammad Bushiri. You can call me Dr. Fiza. I will be teaching you this class for the whole semester. Hopefully, I really actually wish we can meet in person for this first class, but things happened and here it is. So the way I do online class is I just record my lecture and then I will upload it onto my YouTube. So you guys can just go to my YouTube and then just watch it from there. I figured that that's the best way for everyone to be able to access the class, because if we are doing if we are to do synchronous class where everyone will go online at the same time and then we do Zoom meeting, that will take a lot of bandwidth, and everyone needs to have a really good internet. So I figured that's not possible for everyone, and also sometimes I have internet problems, so I guess this is the best way to do it. And I've done it last semester, and the students actually like this way better, because it's easier for them, easier for me. And you can replay the lecture if you need to. So let's get started. So for this class, Ecosystem Biosphere, by the end of the course, you will be able to first identify the principal function and role of biosphere components in facing environmental changes. And the second learning outcome is you should be able to analyze the impacts of human activities on the different components of biosphere. And the third one is you should be able to explain the complexity of hierarchy and interaction between the different components of biosphere. So hopefully by the end of the course, you will be able to do all of these three things. And if you feel like by the end of the course, you are not able to do any of these three things, please feel free to come to me. And of course, at anytime between the course, if you need help with anything regarding the course, just come to me, okay? So the course synopsis is, this course covers the introduction to global ecosystems, ecological system, and abiotic interactions in the environment, the impact of human activity on the biosphere component, and each component's role in facing environmental change is discussed. The hierarchy of complexity in biosphere ecology, from species, population, community, ecosystem to management at the biosphere level, is emphasized. So basically, we are going to learn, hopefully, all of things that we can learn about biosphere. Before we start with the learning part, housekeeping. Well, I prepared this lecture, these slides, thinking that we should be able to meet in person. But anyway, if we do later in the semester, we will be meeting for 3 hours a week for lecture. This class has no lab because we will have one course designated especially for the lab component that will comprise of biosphere and then lithosphere and all of the other fields. So that is a more holistic approach to lab component. Okay, so for this one, is everything is just theory, and everything is just lab lectures. You will be doing some discussions and stuff and things like that. And so every week is a 3-hour class, and office hour to be announced. So office hour, here it's in UPM, it's not something that people do. So office hour is an hour a week that I will give you opportunity to come to my office and have a discussion with me, or if you have any question. So this is not this is an optional time, like for that week. you feel like, oh, I don't understand this week's material, I need to go and see Dr. Fisa to ask to clarify about things, then you can come during my you can come to me during my office hour, okay? And I will tell you when, if we ever go back to UPM and do a physical class. And otherwise, if we still do online class, just go to your Putra Blast, and I will open a forum link over there so that people, so that you guys can ask me questions, okay? So expectations, you as students, I expect you to come to class, complete your assignments up to a university student's level, and spend a total of 120 hours on this course. That includes classes. So classes should be about 42 hours, and the rest should be your personal revision, your self-revision, okay, at home. And me as a lecturer, I only facilitate your learning. I might not be able to tell you everything that you need to know, but hopefully by the end of the course, you will learn all that you need to know from your assignments, from your group discussions, from your self-revision, okay? I just guide you so that you can learn by yourself. So the topics that we will cover in this course, there are 10. The first one is Introduction to Biosphere. We will cover that today. The second one is evolution. The third one is species. The fourth one is population ecology. The fifth one is community ecology. Sixth is ecosystem and biosphere. Seventh is geography biosphere. 8 is biology diversity and biology conservation. 9 is ecosystem services. And 10 is biosphere management. So let's start. First, because this is our first class together, I would like to know everyone. I would like to know about everyone. So I would like you, each of you, to draw an image that represents you. So this is my image. It is a cat in a cup of hot coffee, in a blue cup of hot coffee. It's a black coffee, and this is a drawing that represents me, because I love cats. I have currently, I think I have about 5 in the house, and about 3 outside. So I have quite a lot of cats. I just love cats. I'm a cat lady. And hot coffee, because I love coffee as well. And I just drink black coffee and hot. I don't really like cold coffee. And blue, because I love blue. That's my favorite color. And also that cat is sitting, like relaxing in that warm coffee, because I love relaxing. I'm just a simple person that just love simple things in life. And I don't really like, I'm not someone that needs to do things all the time. So I just like to relax and, you know, watch Netflix, or just lying down with my cats, drinking coffee. So this picture, this drawing represents me perfectly. So I want you to do the same. Just draw a picture that represents you, that can tell all of us in this class about yourself, okay? And then upload that in your Putra Blast. I will share it in the next week's lecture. So that's done. Let's start. So this is for real this time. And So introduction to biosphere. There are three topics in this. There are three subtopics in this big topic. The first one is Earth and life formation. Second one is origin of life of modern ecosystem, and third one is hierarchy and complexity of life. We will touch more on Earth and life formation, and also origin of life. In this lecture, the other, like hierarchy and complexity of life, we will touch it more next week, hopefully. Because when I was doing the slides, and I thought it will be quite a lot to cover everything today. So I think it's best to just stop at around origin of modern ecosystem, and then we'll continue next week, okay? So what is biosphere? It is the regions of the surface and the atmosphere of the Earth occupied by life. So basically, if you look at the Earth is, you know, sphere, and we have a lot of things at the Earth. We have different layers of the Earth. We have the atmosphere, and even the atmosphere, we have different layers of the atmosphere. And the liquid, the water on the Earth is called hydrosphere. The soil, stone and everything, the rocks and everything, that's called a lithosphere. Atmosphere is the air. And biosphere is the area where, the area of the Earth that has life. So it's just all of living things. That includes plants, that includes animals, that includes human, that includes microorganism. And so the biosphere covers some of the layers of the Earth, I mean some of the crust layer of the Earth, and also some of the layer of the atmosphere. So it encompasses some of the atmosphere and some of the crust, Earth crust. Because in the Earth crust, we have animals, we have plants that live in that layer of the Earth. For example, we have worms, we have insects, we have naked mole rat, and animals that do like holes in the ground. And also obviously we have microorganisms in there, in the soil, in the water. And definitely, like in the water, we have seafood, we have like fishes and stuff. And on the crust of the Earth, of course, we have us, we have other animals that just roaming about on the Earth. And then a bit higher than just the surface of the Earth, we have birds, we have sometimes we have, like, you know, mountain goats that goes a bit, that lives higher in the mountain. And we have microorganisms that just follow the wind, because microorganisms, they cannot fly, but because they are super small, that they can follow the wind current. Okay, so that's what biosphere is that that area of the Earth that covers, that encompasses with life. So to understand how life forms, first we need to look at the origin of the universe and the formation of the Earth. I think some of you would have heard about Big Bang. So Big Bang is the current theory about how life, how the universe is formed, how everything just came to be. So we will look a little bit about at that, and also that will explain a little bit about the formation of the Earth. Okay, so I will show you a video. So this video, I got it from YouTube. You can click on the link to go to the original source of the video, and you know, you can just explore the video. They have other videos as well. If you are interested, just do your own search and, you know, learn more about it. Okay, so let's watch. big history. I like this channel. They have lots of interesting thing to learn. Okay, just let's listen.
Earth is the place that we humans call home. It's a very beautiful place with staggering variety, gorgeous landscapes, from redwoods to swallows to beavers to spiders, and of course, 7 billion other humans like you and me, perhaps the weirdest species of all. And then look above us, look at the sun. It's the battery of life here on Earth. But our sun is just one of perhaps 100 billion stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is perhaps just one of 100 billion, maybe 200 billion galaxies in the universe. So how did things get to be the way they are? How was the universe created? Why does it work the way it does? Why are the stars so big? Why are you and I so small? Why do we find ourselves in this particular part of the universe, on this tiny planet, buzzing with life? Why are humans so powerful? What does it mean to be human? These are wonderful questions, and they've been asked by people in all societies, and they've also been asked by a lot of people with great expertise. Geologists ask them, biologists ask them, astronomers, physicists, historians, anthropologists. What we want to do in this course is to take the expert answers and try to blend them into a single coherent story that will explain how everything came to be the way it is, how we fit in, and where perhaps everything is going. Take a look at this timeline. It shows my own journey through time. And what I've done is I've placed on it events that seem important in my own life. We can think of them, if you like, as thresholds, crucial turning points in my life. For example, at the age of 3 months, I traveled to Nigeria. I went to Canada, where I met my wife. I went to university, I trained as a Russian historian, and I got my first job in Australia. All those things are important. But now I carry 3 passports because I've traveled so much. And the trouble is, I'm not really sure, in a sense, what country I belong to, or, in a sense, who I am. I was never really content, therefore, to understand just the history of one country, or even to teach the history of one country, say Russia in my case. What I wanted to know about was the history of humanity as a whole. Now, if you think about it, that question forced me back. If you want to know about humanity, you have to ask about how humans evolved from primates. You could push that back, ask how primates evolved, back and back and back, until eventually you're talking about the origins of life on Earth. And once you're doing that, why not ask about the origins of the Earth and the whole universe? Now, these questions are huge, but they seemed really important to me because asking them gave me a sense of understanding what I am and what it is that I'm part of. Eventually, I realized that all human societies have asked these same questions, I think for the same reason as I asked them, but their answers are incredibly diverse. Some say that the universe has always existed, some say it was created very recently, some say it was made by the gods, some say it arose out of a sort of cosmic mush. And then what the stories do is they go on to tell about the origins of the stars, of the sun and moon, of the mountains and seas and rivers, of plants and animals, and of course, of you and me. Big history is a modern version of all these stories. It uses the best information that we have available in our society. But of course, it's not perfect. New information keeps appearing, and as a result, we have to keep adjusting the story and improving it. And there are many areas to which we don't have perfect answers. We're really not sure. So the story keeps changing in small ways. And that, frankly, is one of the things that makes it so exciting. Now, you've seen my personal timeline. You can think of it as a sort of personal origin story, and you can all write timelines of your own. To some of you, I guess it may seem pretty long, but if you want to look for a long timeline, think about the history of the universe. That timeline is 13.7 billion years. Now let's just take time out to get your mind around that figure. If you were to count numbers, each number a second, and you counted up to 1 million, how long would it take you? Well, the answer is it would take you about 11.5 days. If you were to count to 1 billion, it would take you 1,000 times as long, which is about 32 years. And if you were to count to 13.7 billion, it would take you over 400 years. Now, that's a huge story, but that's the story we're going to tell in this course. It's a fantastic story. It's got lots of twists and turns, lots of unanswered questions, lots of fascinating ideas and stories in it. One of the things we're going to really focus on is the idea of increasing complexity. Over 13.7 billion years, what we see is that gradually there appear in the universe, at threshold moments, as we'll call them, new things, more complex things with entirely new qualities. And we'll focus on 8 of these threshold moments, and they culminate in today's world. The last threshold is the creation of today's world, and that is one of the most complex things we know. So, by the end of this course, you'll have surveyed the whole history of the universe, and you'll know how you fit into it. So, let's get started.
Wait a second. Okay, another one. Okay. Wait a second. Technical difficulties. Oh, I have to pause this and then I'll come back to you. So we got it. Let's watch another one.
The universe is everything, from the tiniest particles to the largest galaxies to the very existence of space, time, and life. But how did it all begin? The origin of the universe is the origin of everything. Multiple scientific theories, plus creation myths from around the world, have tried to explain its mysterious genesis. However, the most widely accepted explanation is the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory states that the universe began as a hot and infinitely dense point. Only a few millimeters wide, it was similar to a supercharged black hole. About 13.7 billion years ago, this tiny singularity violently exploded. And it is from this explosion, this bang, that all matter, energy, space, and time were created. What happened next were 2 major stages of the universe's evolution. Called the radiation and matter eras, they're defined by key events that helped shape the universe. First came the radiation era, named for the dominance of radiation right after the Big Bang. This era is made of smaller stages, called epochs, that occurred within the universe's first tens of thousands of years. The earliest is the Planck epoch. No matter existed in the universe at this time, only energy and the ancestor to the 4 forces of nature, the superforce. At the end of this stage, however, a key event occurred in which gravity split away from the superforce. Next came the Grand Unification Epoch, named for the three remaining unified forces of nature. This epoch ended when one of those forces, called strong or strong nuclear, broke away. Then, the inflationary epoch began, during which the universe rapidly expanded. Almost instantly, it grew from the size of an atom to the size of a grapefruit. The universe at this time was piping hot, and it churned with electrons, quarks, and other particles. Then came the electroweak epoch, when the last two forces, electromagnetic and weak, finally split off. During the next stage, the quark epoch, all of the universe's ingredients were present. However, the universe was still too hot and dense for subatomic particles to form. Then, in the hadron epoch, the universe cooled down enough for quarks to bind together and form protons and neutrons. In the lepton and nuclear epochs, the radiation era's last two stages, the protons and neutrons underwent a significant change. They fused and created nuclei. And in doing so, they created the first chemical element in the universe, helium. The universe's new ability to form elements, the building blocks of matter, cued the matter era. Much as the name suggests, the matter era is defined by the presence and predominance of matter in the universe. It features three epochs that span billions of years, the vast majority of the universe's lifespan, and includes the present day. The first was the atomic epoch. In this stage, the universe's temperature cooled down enough for electrons to attach to nuclei for the first time. Called recombination, this process helped create the universe's second element, hydrogen. This hydrogen, along with helium atoms, dotted the universe with atomic clouds. Within the clouds, small pockets of gas may have had enough gravity to cause atoms to collect. These clusters of atoms, formed during the galactic epoch, became the seedlings of galaxies. Nestled inside those galaxies, stars began to form. And in doing so, they cued the latest and current stage of the universe's development, the stellar epoch. The formation of stars then caused a tremendous ripple effect and helped shape the universe as we know it. Heat within the stars caused the conversion of helium and hydrogen into almost all the remaining elements in the universe. In turn, those elements became the building blocks for planets, moons, life, everything we see today. This ecosystem of everything was only possible because of the many stages in the universe's development. While countless questions about the origins of our universe remain, it's only a matter of time for some long-sought answers to emerge.
So those two videos talk about the formation of the universe. So from the video, what do you think the Earth looked like in the early days of its formation? I let you think about that a little bit. So we know that Big Bang is like a huge bang, like an explosion. And it talk about the videos talk about how in the early days the universe was very hot, and then slowly it cooled down, and stars started to form, and then planets and all of the other things in the galaxy started to form, including the Earth. So what do you think the Earth looked like in the early days of its formation? Okay. So it must have been super hot during the early days of the Earth formation. And in that situation, in that environment of super hot, do you think life would have existed on Earth at that time? Something that we have to talk to think about. Yeah, because if it's too hot, then maybe life was not there yet. So so that makes us question, when does life starts to be on Earth if the early days was too hot? And how is it, what the Earth looks like? Is it like filled with lava? Is it filled with volcanoes and things like that? Okay, let's look at the next video. We are watching lots of videos today. A brief history of geologic time. Let's watch this one.
The tale of life on Earth has been unfolding for about 4 billion years, and we humans are just the last word on the last page of that story, at least so far. And the vast stretches of time that are covered by the history of life can be hard for us to fathom. We rack our brains trying to imagine what a few hundred years looks like, let alone billions of years. And like speaking for myself, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So to help us really appreciate the full expanse of time, scientists have turned to the rocks. By looking at the layers beneath our feet, geologists have been able to identify and describe crucial episodes in life's history, from bursts of evolutionary diversity to disastrous extinction events. These key events of new life and sudden death frame the chapters in the story of life on Earth. And the system that we use to bind all these chapters together is the geologic timescale. First, let's talk about the history of geologic time itself, because figuring out how to read history in rocks was not easy. For much of human history, of course, we had no idea how old the Earth was or what actually happened in deep time or what happened in what order. But in 1669, Danish scientist Nicholas Steno published the first laws of stratigraphy, the science of interpreting the strata, or layers of rock, in Earth's outer surface. Steno argued that the layers closer to the surface must be younger than the layers below them. So the farther down you dig, he thought, the older the fossils are that you find there. Sounds legit, right? But in Steno's day, when some people thought that fossils had literally fallen from the sky for some reason, this was a pretty revolutionary idea. Building on Steno's ideas, Italian geologist Giovanni Arduino went a step further and began naming the layers of rock. In the 1760s, Arduino studied the Italian Alps, organizing their layers based on their depth and composition. The lowest layers of metamorphic and volcanic rocks he called their primary layer. Above those were hard sedimentary rocks, which he called secondary, and the top layers of softer alluvial deposits he named tertiary and quaternary. But because rock layers don't appear in the same order all over the world, there was no way for geologists to compare rocks from one location to another. Without a way to compare strata, there could be no universal timescale. Finally, in 1819, English geologist William Smith figured out the solution to this problem: fossils. By comparing the remains of ancient organisms from different rock formations, Smith could match their ages regardless of how far apart they were. For example, Smith realized that fossils of many early species of trilobites are found below ammonite fossils, which are in turn below certain kinds of shellfish. So any place in the world where you find these first trilobites, you know that you're looking at rock that's older than when ammonites lived. And even in the most ancient rocks that have little or no evidence of life, scientists can still look for signs of the very earliest major geologic events, like when continents first formed, and even when the Earth itself cooled and solidified. Thanks to the work of early geologists like Steno, Arduino, and Smith, modern scientists have used these and other clues to create what we now call the geologic timescale, or GTS. The GTS has been reworked many times to reflect the latest knowledge of Earth's history, and today it's organized into 5 subgroups: eons, eras, periods, epochs, and ages. Organizing time in increments like this allows us to ask questions about history on different scales. In the largest increments, like eons and eras, we can ask the biggest of big picture questions, like, was there life on Earth at this time? If there was, what did it look like? Did it live in the water or on land? This is the kind of top-level view we're going to take today. But the smaller increments of time, like periods and epochs, help us take a tighter focus and ask more specific questions, like, what was the climate like during this window of a few million years? And how did life around the world adapt to it? We'll be talking about those in more detail in future episodes when we talk about each era, period by period. Okay, so let's get the biggest of big picture views of Earth's history right now by taking a tour of all the eons and eras in the GTS. Eons are the largest slices of time, ranging from 500 million to nearly 2 billion years long. And the earliest eon is known as the Hadean. It begins with the very formation of the Earth itself, around 4.6 billion years ago, and ends 4 billion years ago. And this is the only eon that doesn't have any fossils, because back then, the world was just hell. Named after the Greek underworld Hades, the Hadean lived up to its name. The planet was racked by volcanic activity, cosmic bombardments, raging storms, and temperatures that were at times hot enough to melt rock. But even in this searing wasteland, life may have been able to form. While no fossils have been found from this eon, small amounts of organic carbon have been discovered in Hadean rocks that some experts think is evidence of the earliest life. These first organisms were tiny and single-celled, but they were eventually able to shape the future of the entire planet. So their appearance is the one major benchmark of this eon. The Hadean was brought to an end by the cooling of the crust of the Earth, setting the stage for the continents to eventually form. And this cooling marked the beginning of the next phase, the Archean eon, which ran from 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. Named for the Greek word for origin, the Archean was once thought to be when the first signs of life appeared. But at the very least, it's fair to say it was the first time that life flourished, forming massive microbes in the primordial seas. The fossils that these microbes left behind are called stromatolites, or sometimes stromatoliths. The very oldest of them, like those found in Western Australia, date from the Archean. During this time, the atmosphere was mostly carbon dioxide, but the appearance of cyanobacteria was about to change all that. Then, 2.5 billion years ago, the Archean gave way to the Proterozoic eon, meaning earlier life. And around this time, photosynthetic bacteria, along with some multicellular forms of life, spewed tons of oxygen into the atmosphere. This probably wiped out most of the anaerobic life on Earth, but it cleared the path for crucial new organisms, including the ancestral eukaryotes, whose cells each had a nucleus and organelles wrapped up in membranes. Eukaryotes developed into the first really big, complex, and sometimes kind of weird forms of life, such as the frond-like Carnea and the plate-shaped Dickinsonia. These new, larger organisms quickly diversified, and by 541 million years ago, we were at the doorstep of the next and current eon, the Phanerozoic. Its name means visible life, and the Phanerozoic was when life really became obvious. This is the eon that's home to trees, dinosaurs, newts, aardvarks, us humans, basically life as we know it. Whew, how you holding up? You doing okay? We've covered about 3.5 billion years already. Just got another 500 million to go, and then we're home free. Okay, now from here, it's best to explore the Phanerozoic eon through its eras, the next level down in the divisions of time. This will let us explore more recent history in greater detail. The first era of our current eon is the Paleozoic era, which began 541 million years ago. This chapter was defined by the diversification of visible life, and it started with a bang, actually an explosion, the Cambrian explosion. This rapid growth in diversity and complexity in the world's oceans is such a huge deal in the history of life that all the eons that came before it, the Hadean, the Archean, the Proterozoic, they're all collectively known as Precambrian. At the start of the Paleozoic, over about 25 million years, the fossil record suddenly reveals the appearance of complex animals with mineralized remains, hard parts, shells, exoskeletons, that kind of thing. And the very first of these new animals to become truly widespread were the trilobites. They were so common all over the world that they've been used as index fossils for the Paleozoic era for centuries, ever since the days of William Smith. But the trilobites soon had competition. Fish developed teeth and jaws and came to dominate the seas, including the first sharks and armored giants known as placoderms. Meanwhile, the land, which had been barren since the formation of continents back in the Archean, was finally being populated. First by plants and then by arthropods. By 370 million years ago, entire ecosystems had developed on primeval continents. Soon after, the earliest amphibians evolved and hauled themselves out of the water, leaving their first vertebrate footprints in the mud. 299 million years ago, the supercontinent of Pangaea had formed, with an enormous desert at its center. This desert was quickly populated by the ancestors of what would eventually become reptiles and mammals, which could thrive in dry conditions, unlike amphibians. But this time of incredible growth couldn't last forever, and instead, the Paleozoic era ended in cataclysm. 252 million years ago, 70% of land vertebrates and 96% of marine species disappeared from the fossil record, including survivors of previous extinctions, like our friends the trilobites. I still miss those guys. The event, known as the Great Dying, was the most severe extinction in our planet's history, but its exact cause is still unclear. A possible meteorite impact off the coast of South America might be one clue, and in Siberia, layers of basalt show that massive volcanic eruptions covered large swaths of Pangaea and lava. Both of these incidents coincided with the end of the Paleozoic, and it seems more than likely that the extinction had many causes. In any case, the Paleozoic may have begun as a chapter defined by an explosion of life, but it ended in nearly absolute death. It took millions of years for life to recover, but when it did, a new world, the Mesozoic era, had arrived. This is often called the Age of Reptiles, and with good reason. Right from the start of the Mesozoic, reptiles were incredibly successful. This is when they took some of their most famous forms, like dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and a variety of marine species. In fact, all of the non-avian dinosaurs lived only in the Mesozoic, so they remain one of the best index fossils of this era. And many modern groups of organisms also evolved in the shadows of the reptiles, like mammals, frogs, bees, and flowering plants. But the Mesozoic era came to an end 66 million years ago with yet another episode of devastation, this time known as the Cretaceous Paleogene or KPG extinction event. Like all mass die-offs, the KPG had many causes, but probably the biggest of them was a giant asteroid that struck the Earth, sending enormous amounts of ash into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight, and creating a vicious cold snap across the planet. Without the sun's energy, entire plant communities died, and the animals that relied on those plants perished with them. Evidence of this impact can be found in the layer of iridium in rocks dating to the end of the Mesozoic. Iridium is an element that's rare on Earth, but very common in asteroids and comets. And a giant impact crater in the Gulf of Mexico, whose age matches the date of this extinction, has become the smoking gun for the asteroid hypothesis. The victims of the KPG extinction were some of the biggest reptiles of the land, sea, and sky, including all of what we now call the non-avian dinosaurs. Birds, of course, survived the cataclysm, making them the last surviving lineage of the dinosaurs. Okay, we have 66 million years to go, and that's the last major extinction event that we have to talk about. But you might want to freshen up, so I bought these pre-moistened towelettes. It's going to, you have some iridium on this side, on your forehead, other side. With all the great reptiles gone, the smaller animals that remained were able to eke out a living in the next era, the Cenozoic. This is our era, in more ways than one. It's the era that we're in today, and it also marks the rise of the mammals. Soon after the KPG extinction, the climate warmed, and jungles stretched across the planet. Mammals quickly recovered in this hothouse world, and by 40 million years ago, most of the mammal groups that we recognize had come about, like whales, bats, rodents, and primates. But starting around 34 million years ago, the climate began to shift again. This time, ice caps started to grow at the poles, taking up much of the planet's water. And these drier conditions created a new habitat, the grassland, where ancestral horses and antelope were hunted by the first cats and dogs. It was also in these grassy plains, 7 million years ago, that a species of ape called Sahelanthropus became the first known primate to walk upright. 2.6 million years ago, the ice caps expanded even more, and the Earth entered a glacial period. This is the one you hear referred to as the Ice Age. Over the course of these last several million years, most modern life forms that we know about developed and thrived, alongside giants like mammoths, ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. Once again, though, this era of diversity came to a morbid end. Starting around 15,000 years ago, the climate began to warm up, and over the next few thousand years, many of the giant fauna went extinct. By 11,700 years ago, the last major glaciation was over, and modern humans inhabited nearly all the corners of the globe. But how big a role we played in the extinction of the so-called Ice Age megafauna is hotly debated. Regardless, there's no escaping the fact that our species has shaped the Earth to its will since then. Like cyanobacteria and the dinosaurs before us, we've had a huge impact on habitats, other organisms, and the biosphere itself. And as we've learned today, it's the most dominant forms of life that define each phase of deep time. So even though our time on this planet amounts to the last word on the last page of the story of life, we are the authors of the next chapter. One day, the epoch of humans may be detected by the marks we make on the land, the traces of our cities and farms, and our very bodies will be the index fossils of this time. No matter how our chapter ends, we get to be characters in a truly amazing story. Thanks for joining me on this epic or epoch journey through geologic time. Now, what do you want to know about the story of life on Earth? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to go to youtube.com/eons and subscribe. And the fun doesn't end here, so do yourself a favor and check out some of our sister channels from PBS Digital Studios.
Okay.
The tale of life on Earth has...
So that previous video, that person was talking about the geologic timescale and also the life that exists during this time. So from the video, how do you explain the creation of life on Earth? Yeah, you remember that in the early days, the Earth was hot. So it was super hot. Oh, the internet is not good. Anyway, so the Earth was super hot, and then the air is actually filled with carbon dioxide. So life is really, the condition is just not suitable for life, and then actually microorganisms started to form in the water, and cyanobacteria started to form. And cyanobacteria is a type of microorganism that can do photosynthesis. And what it does is during the photosynthesis, it uses this carbon dioxide that is abundant in the atmosphere and then turn it into oxygen. And after a while, oxygen started to fill the air. And then is a time where other life started to be able to live on Earth. So Earth has gone through a lot of changes since its formation 4.6 billion years ago. So early Earth was extremely hot and was filled with carbon dioxide, thus it had no life. And then existence of cyanobacteria creates oxygen that makes other lives possible. And various disasters caused mass extinction events. And surviving species and various climate changes have created the life as we know today. If you remember from the video, there were two, I think, like mass extinction events that killed lots of life before us. And then after that, the earth recovers, and then life recovers, and then that's what created the life as we know today. So what is life? Okay, in this video we'll learn what the characteristic of life is. There are actually 4 characteristics of life, and this is a really good video. Just let's have a listen.
Biologists suspect that the universe is crawling with life. There's life all through the universe, but the truth is we just don't know. The only place we know for sure that life exists is here on our Earth. So that's where we have to study it. Now, what is life? What makes life so distinctive? We all probably feel intuitively that we know what makes life different, but pinning it down precisely is actually very difficult indeed. Let's try a kind of crude comparison. Let's compare 2 big things. Let's compare an elephant and the Earth. Now, we could say the elephant moves, but we've seen that the Earth is kind of dynamic too. Or we could say the elephant grows. Well, even the young Earth sort of grew during the process of accretion. Or perhaps we could say that the elephant, like all living things, acts with a sort of purpose. Here I suspect we're getting nearer to the truth, but it's still hard to pin down for certain. What we can do is we can list some qualities that all living things seem to have. And in what follows, I'm going to describe 4 key qualities that all living things seem to possess. The first quality we call metabolism. All living organisms are made from cells. All cells can metabolize. And what we mean by that is that they can take in energy and materials from the outside world in order to maintain themselves and keep themselves going. Now, this complicated process is governed by instructions that are contained in the master molecule DNA, that's deoxyribonucleic acid, that is present in all cells. The second quality we call homeostasis. It's a complicated word, but it's worth getting on top of. By homeostasis, we mean the ability of all cells, and in fact all living organisms, to keep constantly adjusting to tiny changes in their environment using the energy and materials they get through metabolism. And homeostasis is also governed ultimately by instructions that you can find in the DNA. The third crucial quality is reproduction. However good they are at homeostasis, eventually all cells, all living organisms break down and die. But it's here that life's come up with a really clever trick for preserving itself. Even when the individual dies, before it dies, it can make copies of itself and its DNA and scatter those copies around it. So the individual may die, but the copies will survive. And that's reproduction. The fourth quality we call adaptation. Over many generations, species can slowly change and adapt and diversify as environments change. The way they do this is actually strangely through mistakes in the copying of DNA. Just occasionally, DNA makes mistakes, but the copy works. And when that happens, and you get a new version that can actually do all these things, it can metabolize, it can do homeostasis, it can reproduce, we say that a new species has been created. It's almost as if DNA was slowly learning how to make new species that can do new things in new environments. And that's how we get the huge diversity of life all around us today. Metabolism, homeostasis, reproduction, and adaptation seem to reinforce each other. They sort of go together. Metabolism provides the energy and materials needed for the constant tiny adjustments of homeostasis and also for reproduction. What adaptation does is allow species to make large adaptations, large changes over time as environments change. And that's the key to evolution. Homeostasis and adaptation together explain why life always seems purposeful, because it's as if it's pushing back somehow against the environment. Now, as far as we know, only living things are capable of combining all of these four qualities. So what is it that holds them together, that links them? The answer is the astonishing molecule that we call DNA. You've seen already that DNA seems to play a crucial role in all the four qualities that we suggested may define life. How does it work, and how is it formed? Well, the best way of thinking about DNA is to think of it as being a bit like the software in your computer. DNA contains the instructions needed to make the proteins that go into the cell and do the crucial work needed to keep the cell going. And it also contains the information needed for DNA to reproduce and for the whole cell to reproduce. How's it constructed and how does it work? Well, DNA is a vast molecule, billions of atoms in it. They're organized in two great chains. Each chain has arms, and those arms link up to form like the rungs of a ladder. So the whole thing ends up looking like a ladder. Then it twists on itself to form a double helix, and that folds up compactly at the center of the cell. This is how it works. The information is contained on the arms of the ladder in a special 4-letter code. Molecules inside the cell approach the DNA, unzip the crucial part, read off the code, and then go back into the cell and make the proteins necessary to do what the DNA needs it to do. DNA can also copy itself. This is how that works. The two parts of the ladder separate, and each of the arms goes off into the sludge of chemicals around it and finds its counterpart until eventually you have two identical double strands of DNA. And that's how DNA copies itself, and that's the basis of reproduction in all living organisms. DNA is at the center of our modern understanding of how life works. But even in the 19th century, the English naturalist Charles Darwin had generated a broad understanding of how these changes occur, of how life evolves. Before Darwin's time, most naturalists believed that species were fixed. They didn't change over time. But some had studied fossils, and that seemed to mean that species actually did change over time. The question was, how? That was the question that Darwin tried to tackle. Darwin knew that animal breeders can actually change species quite quickly within just a few generations. The way they do it is by choosing which individuals will breed and which won't. So if you want to breed fat sheep, you let the fat sheep breed and you don't let the thin sheep breed. And by doing that, quite quickly, you can really change an animal or a species. Now, what Darwin noticed is that something very similar seems to happen in the natural world. It's almost as if nature itself selects which individuals will breed and which won't. Think, for example, of an eagle. Think of an eagle with really good eyesight. It's going to get plenty of food. It's going to reproduce. Think of another eagle that has very poor eyesight. It's going to really struggle, and its chances of reproducing are rather poor. So what this means is that the eagle with really good eyesight is likely to have many more offspring, And slowly over time, its qualities will become more and more common. And that particular group of birds is going to change and become more like the eagle with good eyesight. Now, repeated many, many times over thousands or millions of generations, this, Darwin realized, is the mechanism that changes life. Nature is selecting which individuals will breed. He called this mechanism natural selection. And he figured out that it's the key to the evolution of life. Evolution, it turns out, is a never-ending process because the environment keeps changing. So species keep changing. There's no end to it at all. Now, when Darwin first came out with this theory, it was received with considerable skepticism in 19th century Britain. He actually came up with lots of evidence, but not quite enough. And some things he really didn't understand. For example, he hadn't a clue about the role of DNA. But since then, a lot of new evidence has come to make his theory much, much more powerful. Until today, it's the dominant idea in modern biology. And we encourage you to study the evidence. First, look at the evidence available to Darwin. And the best way of doing that is to read his wonderful book, The Origin of Species. It's very, very readable. It's a classic. It's really worth looking at. And then look at the evidence that's kicked in since then. Now, it's really worth doing this because Darwin's idea and coupled with our modern ideas about how DNA works, are really the key to understanding life and how it works.
Okay. So we've watched that video that talks about life. So he said about the 4 characteristics of life, the 4 qualities of life. What makes something alive, something a living thing. Okay, if you remember the 4 characteristics, one is the metabolism. Metabolism is the ability of organism to take something outside, like in the environment, to maintain itself. You know, for us, it means that we find food to eat, water to drink, and then we breathe in the oxygen for our respiration. And for other organisms as well, including for bacteria. Bacteria knows how to like degrade. For example, some bacteria knows how to degrade rocks to get the minerals for its building blocks and stuff. And the second one is homeostasis. Homeostasis is for the ability of the living things, of the organisms to maintain itself, to make sure that it doesn't like really dissolve in the environment, you can say that, just to maintain itself, to stay as one thing, one living thing. And the third one is the ability of living thing, of organism to reproduce, to make copies of its own DNA, to make copies of its own self, and to make sure that when itself dies, the copy of its DNA is still available in the environment. And the fourth one was the ability to adapt to the environment changes. This is, if you remember, he said that this is just a bigger like homeostasis, but dealing with a bigger situation, changes in the environment, and this is what drive evolution. And what drive all of these characteristics? It's all driven by DNA, and DNA gives DNA has the code, the instruction for living things, for organisms to do all of these 4 things. Yeah, and so at the center of it is DNA, and then we have metabolism, we have homeostasis, we have reproduction, and then we have adaptation. And what drives the diversity of the Earth? If you remember from the video, it's homeostasis and also adaptation. But homeostasis and adaptation, it is actually a response to the environment. And if you think about it, these four pictures, trees, they show like 4 different type of trees. We have like pine trees, and then we have palm trees, and then we have trees that are able to form canopies and like communicate with the other trees around it to make these canopies that doesn't touch each other. And then we have this tree at the far right that's so huge that you can actually like build a tunnel through it. I've actually been to this forest with a large, huge trees is in Yosemite in California. I was trying to find my picture standing next to the tree, but I think I lost the picture. So what do you think drive this like diversity of trees around the globe? How can it be the trees like adapt to this different environment? Or say, I think the more accurate question to ask is, how can the environment be different for all these trees, for them to have developed different characteristics to live in that environment? Okay, how can the environment be different? So what drives the diversity of the earth, of the life on earth? So the answer is actually the different climate. Different climate will give different pressure to the different organisms, so that the natural selection will select the best characteristic that will make the organism to live better in that area, to survive the area. So what affects the climate of a place? If you think about it, it's actually the location. Like for us in Malaysia, we are very close to the sea. We are surrounded by sea, so our climate is hot and humid. But for those living in, say, in Russia or in Africa, in Australia, in the in the center of Australia, or in the center of USA, they have a drier climate because it's so far away from the ocean. So the climate are drier than us, and also because Malaysia, we are situated very close to the equator, so that's why we are hot. Our climate is hot, but those who the area that are upper north and also lower south, they are not as hot as us because they are not close to the equator. And not only that, the elevation from the sea level also affect the climate of a place. Think about Cameron Highland. Think about Mount of Kinabalu. The higher you go, the cooler it is, and of course the extreme most part is Everest. It's the higher it is. It's just super cold with a lower air pressure. And also there's one country, I forgot what the name is, but it's actually situated close to the equator, actually just the same as us, but because the elevation is higher, the climate over there is actually cooler, even though it is situated closer to the equator. So lots of things that mix into a climate of a place. Okay, mainly like if you put it if you want to describe it in a word, it's actually the location. But the location means a lot of things. Proximity to the sea, proximity to the equator, and the elevation, the wind, and things like that. So all of this will affect the climate of a place, and eventually will affect how organisms in that place to adapt to the climate. And that's how we got diversity. And like I said, if you think about the Earth, those that is in the middle, those that are closer to the equator, like us, that's where the Earth is actually closer to the sun. That's why it's hot in the middle of the Earth. And those who are higher up north or lower down south, it will be farther away from the equator. The way the sun shines to Earth, to the place up north and also down south is also different. It's like, it's not just like straight away, it comes at an angle, if you think about it, because Earth is not like flat like that. Earth is curved. So the sun comes at an angle to those who are living in that curve. Okay, so up north and down south, they are cooler. The sun is shines a little bit different than us in the equator. And not only that, the movement of the Earth affects the wind current on Earth. If you see this wind cells, there are 6 wind cells on Earth. And not only that, wind affects the wind current affects the ocean current as well. So all of these things will affect the climate of a place. Okay. And but one more thing, if you think about it, how can a place be where it is? And how, for example, how can us be here close to the equator? How can the polar region, how can the Arctic is there up north, and the North Pole, and Antarctica is down at the South Pole? Or how can India be where it is? Or how can Australia be where it is? And all of this affect the diversity of life. And sometimes when people start to study about the diversity, the biodiversity of organisms, they started to find that some organisms, their close relative is actually like at the opposite side of the Earth. So people start to like question how that can be when they are farther miles, thousands of miles apart, and how can the species are similar to each other? And the answer is actually from continental drift. Okay, we will watch another video that talk about a little bit about continental drift. So here it is. Let's have a listen.
Alfred Wegener proposed a theory in 1912 that the great continents of the Earth had drifted over geological time and were once all joined together in a giant landmass we now call Pangaea. His idea was based on the way the present continents fit neatly together, and by the way bands of fossil-bearing rocks join up across continents like this. Unfortunately, Wegener was unable to provide a mechanism for this movement, and his theory was ridiculed by the scientific community until 1965, when the theory of plate tectonics was published. This proposed that the continents were moved around on great plates driven by convection currents in the hot mantle of the Earth. For details, see our related video. Perhaps the most dramatic evidence came from the magnetism of rocks each side of the mid-ocean ridges. When rocks solidify, they become weakly magnetic in the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. However, every few million years, the Earth's magnetic field flips, so the north magnetic pole becomes south pole, and vice versa. And this change is signaled in the rocks. Scientists found that the rocks each side of the mid-ocean ridge were magnetized first in one direction and then in another, like this. Magma solidifies, locking in the magnetism. New magma forms as the plates move apart. The magnetic field reverses. More magma solidifies, locking in the reversed polarity, and so on, creating a pattern that repeats each side of the ridge, with the rocks getting older the further you are from the ridge. Clear evidence of the ocean moving apart over millions of years. Further evidence came from plotting where Earth's volcanoes and earthquakes were situated. From this map, you can see that they form lines around the globe, marking out the edges of the great tectonic plates. You get almost all earthquakes and volcanoes at plate boundaries. And finally, we find the great mountain ranges right alongside where two plates are pushing into each other. The Himalaya are being thrust upwards as India moved and is still moving slowly into Asia. And as the Pacific plate is subducted under the Asian plate, the islands of Japan, with many earthquakes and volcanoes, and the deep ocean trench to the east were formed and are still being formed.
Okay. So that's about continental drift. So how does continental drift affect biodiversity? So we know that continental drift cause different parts of the world to like be where it is, which in turn affect its location, which in turn affect its climate, which in turn affect the biodiversity of the organisms living there. And also at the same time, before the supercontinent Pangaea breaks up, the plants and also the animals, they are already living there, especially in the around the border of where the break happens. That's when the species, the same species go went separate ways and happen to be placed at two different parts of the world, and then they developed, they adapt to the newer climate, and then they developed into new species. Okay, that's how continental drift affect biodiversity. And this is another video. Let's watch this one. So this is biogeography.
Next up, biogeography.
Well, biogeography is the study of how animals, plants, and other organisms have come to occupy the places on the globe that they do.
Imagine a new island being born in the middle of the ocean. At first, it's a hunk of rock, lifeless, but gradually, seeds and insects and small animals originating from nearby land masses get blown over on the winds. They come crashing ashore, pushed by the waves. Not all the organisms make it. But those that do, with time, adapt to island living, perhaps even evolving into new species. Just take birds. There are the finches of the Galapagos Islands, the birds of paradise of Papua New Guinea, the honey creepers of Hawaii, and so on. In each case, a single island species diversified into an array of species found nowhere else on Earth. Biogeography's also got something to say about why some closely related species flourish on different continents. It seems odd until you recall that Earth didn't always look this way. A few 100 million years ago, all land was part of Pangaea, a hulking supercontinent. There were no vast oceans to interfere with the movements of organisms. But then, starting about 170 million years ago, the continents drifted like vast rafts across the sea. And the species living along the edges, they were split in two. Fast forward to the present day, and you get a plant in South America whose close relatives grow in the tropical Pacific.
We can use phylogenetic trees as sort of maps to help us reconstruct the movements of organisms across the planet.
So that's biogeography. That's basically what we are trying to look at too, actually. It's where how life lives, how organisms came to be living, occupied one place. Okay, and also that continental drifts has a play in that too, and also, of course, this affects biodiversity. And let's see. So I want to stop there, and I want you to think about what comes after that, okay? So today we've learned the formation of the universe. We already learned about the Big Bang and the formation of the universe, the formation of the Earth, the formation of life on Earth, the characteristics of and the building blocks of life, which is, I hope you remember the 4 characteristics of life. And also the building blocks of life, which is the DNA, and also the driver for biodiversity. The driver for biodiversity, of course, the location, plus the characteristics of life, the adaptation, the homeostasis, and also the DNA, the mutation. And so I want you to think about what do you think we will learn next? And what is your reflection from today's lesson? How like the continental drift cause species to break up, and what happens after this? Okay, and what do you think, in terms of your reflection, what do you think about today's lesson? What are your thoughts? Do you think Big Bang Theory is real? Do you think that the creation of life, like the theory that they have on the creation of life, makes sense? You know, and what do you think we will learn next after we've know all of these things that we've learned today? And that's it. Like I said, in this course, as your lecturer, I will be your facilitator for your own learning. Okay, we live in a digitized world. Everyone has internet, and there are vast information on the internet. I'm just here to guide you to get to the right information. And also I want you to not stop asking question and not stop being curious. Of course, this is a university. I will not like spoon feed you things, and also I'm not one of those people who believe in study for the exam, although that is still important. But at the end of the day, I would like you to be eager and keep on curious and like keep on learning for the sake of learning. And so in this class, I will ask you lots of questions. What do you think? Things like this open-ended question, that's my favorite questions. Okay, that's my favorite type of questions. And I want you to be active in this class, like giving reflections, giving your thoughts, your opinion. Okay, don't be shy about giving your opinions. Just go to Putra Plus, and I will open a forum there. If you have questions, if you have opinions, if you have your reflection, if you want to talk something, to have a discussion with your classmates, because you don't know, because you guys are new students and you haven't met each other yet. I strongly urge you to have a discussion in your Putra Plus, in the forum section. Okay, that's it for this week. I will do another lecture, another recording for a second week. And please don't forget to submit your drawing about yourself. I will share that with the class next week, hopefully. And until next week, stay safe, wash your hands, of course, and don't forget to wear your mask. Let's fight this COVID-19 together. Until I see you, bye, 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 bye.